All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Higher Caliber Podcast. This is episode 25. So today we have Chris Niswander, John Repp, of course, Tim, and myself. So welcome, guys.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is John's, no problem. This is John's third appearance, but if you wouldn't mind giving yourself a brief introduction history, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Well, what do you want to know? You want me to start in childhood? Or?
Yeah, start there.
One day I was born.
So I'm a full-time firefighter paramedic. I operate a exterior cleaning service in my spare time. Veteran of the United States Army and the Operation Enduring Freedom. And I like to party.
I think that pretty well sums him up.
Yep. Chris?
Let's see. I was born and grew up in Lucas. Air Force veteran. Sorry, high ASVAB score. I started out once I got out of the Air Force in law enforcement and did 13 years at the sheriff's office. Did quite a few things while I was there. During that period of time, I got talked into volunteering in the fire service, and cumulative total between volunteer and career was about 32 years. Ended up having two chiefdoms, I guess you would call them. First one at Madison for about almost 7 years. And then left there and went to my hometown in Lucas and decided I was going to do that for fun and be a grunt, and ended up being chief there for 6 years. So
can't escape it.
Yeah,
so much for that idea.
I've been working for a company selling fire equipment, loose equipment, and then about almost 5 years ago transferred into apparatus sales. So that's what I'm doing now. Lived here all my life. My now wife, we lived in Middleburg Heights for about 3 years, and until she determined I was going to be on snapped if I lived up there with all those people in cars. So we found a nice quiet place in Weller Township by Olivesburg, and that's home base now for about the last year, actually. I've been home brewing beer this is my fourth year. That's something that I went completely out of control. So, as Tim I know can attest to. But
yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
That's about it.
Great.
Perfect.
So it was a few episodes ago. Me and Tim were talking about his mentors over the years, and he had mentioned you as one of them. Lucky you, right?
Lucky me. Had him fooled.
And we always kind of scratch the surface about leadership whenever we're talking. So we decided we were going to have some people on that have been doing it. Well, I was going to say longer than us, but I've really never been doing it. So a little more
you don't know
insight. That. I mean, maybe here and there. I dabble here and there. Maybe.
More than you think.
You're the leader of this podcast right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Add that to the resume.
Yeah.
Podcast leader. Check.
So, Chris, when was the first time you kind of found yourself in a leadership position?
Oh, geez.
Or at least looking back and realized you were in one the whole time?
That I actually realized, I guess probably when I was in the sheriff's department. I did, like I said, I was in had several roles there. Of course, started out in patrol but then, I was a K-9 handler for a number of years. Ended up heading up the K-9 unit. I made sergeant there. I was a shift commander, assistant shift commander on nights for a long time. And, those were, I guess, my first real tests of managing people or managing personalities, as I like to call it. So,
Yeah.
So when you found yourself in that role, what kind of resources did you have? Any resources back in the day to kind of hone those skills, or was it just kind of by the seat of your pants? Or
Yeah, geez. A lot of it was by the seat of your pants. I mean, there were always more experienced people, and those don't have to be necessarily older people. I mean, there were a lot of people that were in the same median age group as us, but different experiences, I guess. Everybody has their own set of skills, from wherever.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, there were definitely people that you look up to, and more so people to go to for certain things that obviously, nobody knows everything about everything, but a lot of people know a little bit about something. So
everybody has their strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly.
Was there what year did you say you were at the sheriff's department?
83 through 95 ish. Yeah. And then, when I left, actually the sheriff at the time had me come back and kind of take control of the reserve unit for about 4 or 5 years. So I guess that is a little time there, but
I'm curious about if there was any resources on leadership, or it's something you just kind of did. Like nowadays, there's a million books and everybody's read them, or, and they're great. But I'm kind of wondering back then if it's like, you want me to read a book or just tell you what to do? Like, you know what I mean? Was there any of that?
I mean, yeah, there were.
Probably by retired Army generals and
mostly, yeah. That's where most of, and still, there still were a lot of the leadership books, videos, things nowadays come from. There's still a lot of that, and it's for good reason.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Can you attribute any of your what you know or what you've learned to a certain person? Like, did you have a mentor growing up or in the fire or police side of it? Like who did you look up to, and who did you try to follow, basically?
Well, you have to start with your parents. Kudos to them. I always tease people nowadays when we're out with mom and dad and run into people. I say I'm their fault, but yeah, it starts there. I mean, that's where you get your basis. But it's hard to pick just one. There were, I don't know, it was like a community of people that kind of lent different things,
Sure.
to make up how you think about things and how you conduct yourself. But that's not always been stellar. But
right. It takes a village.
Mm-hmm. What about you, John? Before we went to the Army all those years ago, was that something you ever were you unlike me and wanted to get in and be like, I'm gonna be the guy? I personally don't think that was your attitude, but
Well, so my first exposure to being in a leadership role was growing up. I worked in a pizza shop. I started there when I was like 14, but my parents came to own that place eventually. I have 3 brothers. We all used to work there.
Mm-hmm.
And when my parents bought into it, I moved into like a management role, and I was probably 20. I might have been 19, but I was like 19, 20. And I can tell you for sure, I was terrible at it. I still, to this day, people don't believe me. I tell people to this day, the most stressful job I ever had was being a quote unquote manager. And I put it in air quotes because I shouldn't even call myself that, but I was the guy with the key. Most stressful job I've ever had. And that's including, being a fireman, being in the Army and seeing combat. Managing a place like that is just, it's a completely different ball game, right? Especially you're primarily dealing with people who, minimum wage employees. And I'm not saying like a derogatory term, but a lot of kids that it's their first job.
So they don't know how to act.
Yeah. A lot of people who aren't kids, but maybe are just not the best employees per se. And you would also get rock stars too. I mean, there's some people that would just be, you can just tell it's who they are as a person. But managing that situation was incredibly difficult, stressful. Like,
did you know you were bad at it while you were doing it, or just retrospectively?
Definitely in hindsight, but at the time, I don't think I knew that I didn't know. Like, I don't think I knew what I didn't know. And I was just doing the best I could. And it's kind of like, you just tell people what to do. And if they don't do it, you tell them louder.
Just sling and zaw.
A big part of that too was I also don't think I was setting the best example. Like, I don't think I was a total dirtbag, but I think that's something we'll probably get into is like, for me, part of leadership is also just being a role model and showing people like, I don't just expect you to do these things. This is kind of how I do business. And I'm not just telling you do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. What actually made it hard about, you said it was hard or stressful?
Yeah. So there's just always, it's a fast paced job. Like probably anybody who's worked in a restaurant or fast food or anything like that has probably had a similar experience. Sometimes you have everybody, you have 15 people working and it's not that busy and that kind of sucks. And then sometimes you have like 4 people and you're just getting your shit pushed in. But it's just that the hard part was because I didn't know how to manage. And I guess I could separate management from leadership, but I didn't know how to manage. And I was trying to the answer was always to do more myself.
Right. To take more of the work on.
And you figure the aspects of management in that role is like, maybe you're hiring people, maybe you're firing people and disciplining people. You have to order the supplies and stuff like that. You have to manage day-to-day operations. Managing the employees is kind of the hard part because a lot of the other stuff is a little more, I don't know what the word is. It's a little more predictable. Like, even though it's unpredictable, when you're dealing with people, it's completely different terrain because like people are individuals and you can sometimes look at it as a whole of how people are as a whole, but you have to deal with people individually. So that was the hard part, was just the having, 20 at any given time, you got 20 things going on in your head and trying to figure out how you're going to do it effectively. And usually what would happen is I would always be putting out fires. It was always an emergency, So yeah, that's basically it. I could talk more about that, but I don't want to get too far into the weeds.
I mean, did anybody show you how to fire somebody or discipline anybody? So you were just kind of,
did you YouTube it?
Lost in the sauce?
No, YouTube, even then YouTube wasn't what it is now. I mean, it was pre-Jocko. But if there was information out there, I didn't know about it.
Right.
And I was basing off of, like Chris said, how I grew up and how my parents were. And also like now I'm working with my parents too. And that was my first job. So I did have 2 managers that I worked under for a period of time. So I learned a little bit from them. They both had good qualities, some more than others, but basically I was just running things like how they were running things and how my parents were running things. And I had no concept that there was another way. Right.
Yeah. So Chris, back to you. I've just talking to people that, like when Tim was on Madison, that have all worked under you. They usually talk about how consistent you were with anything. So even if they didn't if they didn't like the policy or they did, you were at least consistent about it. Is that something you learned early on, or does it, I mean, it makes sense when I just say it out loud like that, but it's not. A lot of times I think that's what people are lacking is consistency, whether it be discipline or.
Yeah. Well,
like that.
I think part of that is, as when you're, no matter what profession you're in that profession, and there's certain things as an employee you expect. And as you move up the ranks or whatever, you try to manage or lead. They're not the same things, but as you would have wanted it at a lower level. So consistency is a very important thing from a leader or a manager, or chief, whatever. You try to be fair and equal. You try to be consistent. Fair and equal also aren't the same thing. They live on the same street, but not in the same house, I guess. I mean, no, there's always going to be people who disagree with you, don't like how you're doing things. But I always looked at it as this is what I know. This is how I would want to have had it be when I was I was in those those ranks. But no, that's encouraging to hear that, because you don't really get that feedback as how people thought you did. There were days I didn't think I was doing very well at all, and
right.
Some days I thought things were going well, but
yeah, I'm sure that's just part of the human condition as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and and you look back, and hindsight's 20/20, but I learned a lot in a short period of time. And were there things I would have done different? Absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think too that, like, I think you used the word consistency, but being predictable as being a worker bee, like having some predictability is good too, because nobody likes when you're completely blindsided by something one way or the other. So if you're consistent as a leader and as a manager,
yeah, absolutely,
and people know what to expect, I think that's good for, the overall environment.
Yeah, they know they're either going to be busting their ass or they're going to be doing nothing. Nobody likes to not know what to expect when they get on the job.
Sure.
And they don't know what your mentality is going to be that day.
Or you're Jekyll and Hyde, and some people are your best friend one day, and then the next day they're trying to hem you up for something,
Definitely
something stupid. And that's the type of stuff that, can just drive a wedge between management or leaders and the
Right.
That's true.
the body. I don't know what you would call the lessers.
It's a crazy thing. And my most recent experience with that was going from lieutenant to fire chief. And it was like, and I tell people this, when I teach officer classes, but I don't care how well you think you know that job, until your ass is in that chair, you don't have any idea what that entails. And it's, there's going to be budgeting, there's going to be personnel stuff, but man, there's stuff that comes up that you just, you got to just deal with it. And there's no real way to prepare for some of that stuff.
Right. I think that's a really good point though. And it comes up often because you get people, like, I don't know how it is where you guys are, but you get people that get newly promoted and, they're kind of being watched, right? Because and I use the example of, we're all familiar with the fire service. I don't like to always go back to that, but it's familiar. You're a blue shirt, right? You get promoted to lieutenant. Everybody's watching you to see, because everybody knows blue shirt Jared Center and how he operates. And they're like, oh, is he going to be hard dicking us now that he's got that white shirt?
Yeah.
But what happens a lot too is people, it seems like, struggle to make sometimes what seems like a simple decision. And people like blue shirts will watch that and kind of criticize it. And because I've been in that situation before, like, I have empathy for it, where you could say, like, I'm the best paramedic when I'm not the one who's like running that call. When I'm just on the outside and I'm kind of like taking in the information, I'm not writing the report, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have a lot more bandwidth.
Yeah. And it's easy. I think you have to be careful about armchair quarterbacking because that happens a lot too, but it's the whole detachment, right? Like you're detached from the situation. Maybe you're seeing something that other people don't see, but, when your balls are on the bandsaw, it's harder to make a call, even if it is seems like a simple decision. It's different when you have the responsibility.
Write that down.
What exactly?
I like that when your balls are on the bandsaw. I like it. We're going to make a shirt.
Well, you got the computer over there, bud.
I know. Okay, I'll write it down.
What was it like to make that transition though? Like you were a lieutenant, but you were still probably, one of the guys, like, and then you're the fire chief.
And then you're not.
And then you're not. But that day, it's one of those things like with consistency, it's like, well, I don't want everybody to think I'm a different person, but at the same time, you're still responsible for being the chief, so I guess you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because everyone's like, you've changed.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah, it's not that the person changes, it's that their responsibilities change. And I like that word. I don't like in charge. I like responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And, the big realization is, okay, yesterday I was only responsible for this, but today I'm responsible for all this. I'm responsible for, X number of people that this is how they feed their family, and responsible to the community, responsible to the elected officials, responsible to, there's just a ton of stuff. It hits you in the face right first day, pretty much. And you just got to dig your heels in and decide, okay, it's time to go to work. And this is the new program. And the whole transitioning from one of the guys to the boss, obviously you still have the same interpersonal relationships with a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's on you. And you struggle at first trying not to let that cloud decisions, because the last thing you want to do is play favorites or,
sure,
and it's, especially on a smaller department, that's kind of hard.
Yeah. I always, and I've never really been in that situation, but I think that's, once I do get promoted, that's going to be one of the toughest things that I navigate, because we live with each other. We are family. You go from, these are my buddies, these are my brothers, to, hey, now I'm responsible for you.
Now I'm your dad.
Yeah, now I'm dad.
Now you're dad.
I don't know yet. I mean, people can tell you that you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that, but how do you actually navigate that in real life? I think that's going to be a challenge for me.
I think you just got to, and the way I looked at it is I'm just going to try and do the best I can know how or figure out to make these things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get it right every time? No. I mean, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying.
Right.
And that is the difficult
Put that on
part.
A t-shirt.
The buddy to boss thing is tough.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, you learn the role, I guess, to a point. You're never going to know it all. You're never going to be the end all for that position. But yeah, it's difficult, and it's part of managing personalities, because the fire service alone has tons of personalities, and you go from department to department. And since I've left the fire service and I've been going to departments all over the state, you realize it's just the same circus, different clowns. That's really what it is.
Well, I've realized that by going to that other department that I work for now. There's the same players, the same characters, Just the names have changed.
Firemen, anywhere you go, firemen are firemen.
Yeah, exactly.
Or firefighters, if you will.
Yeah.
But
Be inclusive.
Fire people.
Our ESG score just tanked. Thanks.
yeah, it's all right. I don't know what that means, but it sounds good.
I don't know. John's got a mullet. That should count for something.
So yeah, I have long hair.
White Christian national.
I would imagine too, there's a difference between being promoted to lieutenant or kind of like first line supervisor. In that role, you're still working with the guys, you're living with them, you're ultimately responsible, but the departments, some of the departments I've worked at, but it seems like it's kind of if you have a good relationship, it doesn't really seem like there's that leadership divide where it's just like you against everybody else. It seems like people work well together, but when you make the jump to like an administrative position, like you go to be the chief and now you're in an office and you see the guys, but you're not talking to them every day and you're dealing with, city hall budgets, it seems like that's a harder jump to make.
Yeah. That first jump, that guy on your crew is naturally probably the guy that
he's
is
maybe
wired to
the big brother.
Yeah.
He's not dad, but he's the big brother.
So it's a natural well, this makes sense. He's a lieutenant or a captain now or whatever.
Right.
And even on a smaller department, it's probably even harder because there's like not this delineation. Whereas if you work in Columbus, how often do you think they see their chief or talk to their chief? Like, it's probably a bad day if you're talking to the chief.
Right.
You work at even, I don't know, a 200 person department. The chief is just the chief.
Right.
And
might as well be the president.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. But you work in a department with, 12, 14, 20 members. It's a little bit more personal. Yeah. That may not necessarily be a bad thing, but it is a different challenge.
Yeah, there's not a lot of gap between line people and administration. It definitely, I think I don't say it's more of a challenge because a really big department, I can't imagine the chief's job there. Although they do have a lot more ability to delegate to other levels of management, it's still that's got to be the ultimate hot seat. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think another thing that you said that I like too is you just said, like, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying. I think that's part of it, is being able to kind of audit yourself on a regular basis and just be honest about the decisions you make and how you handle situations. And a big one is being able to admit when you were wrong, which that's probably just life in general. People don't like to say they were wrong, but I don't think there's anything wrong with just saying like, hey guys, or hey, this XYZ person, I'm not thrilled about the way I handled that. In the future, I'll probably do it differently. I just want you to know that.
Yeah. I think being able to take feedback is probably a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
that's the only way you're going to grow. Honestly,
what if you want to give somebody honest feedback, what's going to happen? Like,
it's not going to be great.
They're going to get pissed.
It's always a personal attack.
Yeah, it's hard not to.
Yeah.
2 positives and a negative, maybe.
That's a good. You got to front load. You got to front load and be like, "Oh, you're really doing a good job.
You have nice hair."
Yeah.
But
but if you say everything you said up to that point goes out the window.
Yeah. That's challenging. I've been in that seat, not taking the criticism, but trying to explain to someone, because I always told the people that I worked with that I don't think it's fair to just talk behind your back. Like,
sure,
if there's an issue, I'd like an open line of communication and we'll talk about it. And I thought that was really good, and it didn't work.
Yeah,
at all.
I think there's a place for a good old fashioned ribbing sometimes too, though.
Yeah,
as long as it's, I don't want to say in good fun.
Maybe come from the appropriate people, but
well, I think depending on the situation, sometimes your peers are the appropriate people, like try and handle stuff at the lowest level. And sometimes breaking somebody's balls, blue shirt to blue shirt is the way that you handle it before it becomes an issue with administration.
I think that's where a lot of frustration comes in the fire service, military, whatever, when you have the guys in the middle, like captain level or whatever, that aren't willing to send the feedback up because shit's supposed to go uphill. And then the guys on the bottom are frustrated, and then, it's a nightmare. But if the person at the top's not willing to hear it, then why are you going to keep, shouting at a wall?
Right.
So
I think that's a good point. I think one of the things that kills morale more than anything is when people, I don't know what the word is, but like kind of there's like the body, and then there's like first line management, mid management. Cause like for you, your captain is like my lieutenant, right? So, but when you're kind of part of the body and you raise an issue, I don't think it's a matter of the issue per se. It's when there's some kind of an issue and there's kind of an easily identifiable solution, and then nothing ever gets done about it. And that's where, you talk about handling stuff at the lowest level. Like if you want to empower people to handle stuff, if your Lieutenant Jared Center or Captain Jared Center doesn't want to hear about every little thing that happens around here that needs to be fixed, you got to empower people to take care of it on their own. But when they come to you with a problem and they say, here's a problem, but I'm proposing this solution, and you can just say, okay, make it happen. But if it just falls on deaf ears, it gets to the point where they're like, well, I'm not even going to bring it up because I know what the outcome is going to be.
What's that? Sorry.
No, I'm good.
What's that sign that you had on your desk? Something about if you come to me with a problem, have a solution. That was on your desk, right?
That basically said,
I'm paraphrasing.
Anybody can come in with a problem. Leaders bring solutions. And, I guess that basically just means, sure, I'll listen to your complaint, your idea, your issue, but I expect that with that problem, complaint, issue, idea, you're also going to bring to me, how are we going to fix it? Here's my idea for fixing it. This is the idea to get where we want to be with this idea. Simply because I think it makes people think, and that's a little bit part of some ownership. Trying to think, I had a thought and it fell out. I'm old.
You told us you started at the sheriff's department in '83, so I think most people just assumed.
Yeah, to make it official right now, I am old. But yeah, it's and the whole scope, I guess, of this podcast is about leadership. And one of the things that I've always thought and tried to kind of go by is, not everybody's in a leadership position. And this is especially true in the public sector and public safety as a rule, is everybody has some leader in them. Okay. It may not ever manifest itself to being promoted to a leadership role, but as a leader, you have to look at those under you and try to figure out how you best get that little bit of leader to come out in each one. Because if you can accomplish that, if you can get everybody using that little bit of leader that they have in them, I think you have a more cohesive unit and everything seems to go better. I like to think I did that in at least some instances. I didn't happen in every one, but that's just people. And that's part of that deal.
Yeah. More like, don't think of leadership as a position per se. It's just, you have these qualities let's play to your strengths.
Exactly.
I think a part of that too, though, is like, you got to know when you can take it too far. Right.
Oh, sure.
And some people, like, another thing that I think people don't like is when somebody is way before their time. Well, I guess that's a little bit subjective.
Counts me out.
No, but when people come in and from day one, they're after a promotion, and you're like, I don't know, maybe you learn this job first before you start looking for the next one. And that's like viewing it as you're putting this position on a pedestal, and it's like, it's a leadership position. It's all about the position. It's like, I mean, if you really want the extra 10% in pay, I don't think I've never heard anybody in a leadership position say it was worth it for the money, in the fire service or in the military, especially, because the pay gap is probably even smaller, but it's
a fine line, because it's okay to want something.
Sure.
But if you're going to sit there and just read a book and then when you take your nose out of the book, you're a dirtbag,
right?
Then,
well, yeah. And those people exist.
And when you go to, fire officer school after fire officer school, and you're just doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah. You've been on the job for 2 years and you got fire officer 17.
Yeah. And people debate about the rank between the man, or the rank in the man, like what's more important. And I think the answer is it's both, but you can't be 100% about the rank.
Yeah.
You're going to fail.
What if there was no rank?
Right.
Right. Then what? The inmates are just running the prison, but somebody's going to emerge as a natural leader.
Definitely.
Lord of the Flies scenario.
Yeah.
Usually your senior people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be learned from those people. And I don't think that's taken advantage of enough. And I don't think certain senior people in any department realize that that's part of their role.
Mm-hmm. What kind of impact that plays.
Or the younger people would be much better than they already are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's the other side of that too, though, is there are people who are more senior, and decide they want to get that promotion and wear that, wear that white shirt. But if you're somebody who, and this may not even be reality, but if the perception is you never did anything for this place for 20 years and now you want to get promoted, like, that doesn't sit well with people either.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's like, it's never too late to turn this franchise around, but that's the other side of the coin too that you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's going to be hard for some people that they've made a reputation for themselves, but then they honestly want to change. And then and people just don't believe them.
Yeah. I always say, don't put their fire out.
Yeah.
Let them, how many times, I'm sure we all do the same thing. It's like some days you go, I'm going to do this different, and you're all, feeling motivated, and the last thing you want is for somebody to come shit in your Cheerios.
Well, that's hard too. I mean, if you work at a place and say you worked under a micromanager your entire career and your morale's just shot, you're like, I can't go anywhere else. And you're just not a dirtbag employee, but maybe you're just, doing your job and that's it. And then when it's your time to shine, you're like, oh, I'm going to do this and this, because maybe you feel like the handcuffs have been taken off. I kind of get that too.
Sure.
Well,
you look at some people you can look at, and I know people personally who have had rough career patches with just rough situations. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like you said, it takes the wind right out of their sails. And sometimes you wonder, it's like, is this them as a person, or were they made this way? And you're like, our job's already hard enough without having to deal with all that stuff too. You throw that in on top of it. I could see why somebody just at some point just checks out and they're like, no, I'm just collecting a paycheck until I can retire.
Just go hide.
I don't know. I mean, I've been at my current job I'm coming up on 5 years. Dang.
I remember when you were so young.
Yeah. But I even kind of catch myself, or recently caught myself, just kind of going through the motions. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm not a ball of fire. I'm not one of those people that's just constantly walking around looking for something to do. But lately I've kind of been, and I've talked to other people too, that was a little reassuring. And I said, I feel like I shouldn't feel the way that I feel for only being here. I mean, I've been in the profession for 6 years. And somebody else told me the same. He said, I did hit the same thing when I was around like 5-6 years. And
yeah, isn't there a name for that?
The 7-year itch?
No, not that one. Anywhere. I feel like people just add a number of insert number slump.
Yeah.
5-year slump. Okay, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think it was reassuring to hear that other people go through that. Also, I heard somewhere that the average career of an EMS professional is 5 years, which I know we're firefighters, but we're mostly paramedics. So I think we kind of fit into that too. And I was like, yeah, I kind of see it, like the honeymoon phase is over. Like now it's kind of just a job, or not just a job, but it's a job.
It's a job.
And I had to, like I said, be honest with myself. And I've been trying to be a little bit more proactive. And again, like I'm not breaking any records, but there are times too where we have new people come to our department that have been on the job longer than me, if they came from somewhere else. And it's hard for me to be like, come on, kid, I'm going to teach you something.
Right.
But also it's like, look, you're still new to this place. And if you're going to suck here, it's not going to be my fault this time. So
it's a good attitude to have.
Yeah. I maybe in the past, I maybe could have helped a little more than I did, but yeah, I don't even know how I got started down that rabbit hole, but it's just being mentorship, right? That's part of it too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think mentorship can either make or break you, especially in those first 5 years.
Oh, for sure. Even the first year.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, and even at the place I'm at now, it was hard because I was on the other side of that. I came in with experience as the new guy, and everybody, and I don't know if they just didn't want to step on my toes.
Sure.
But I still feel like they should have just went through everything like I was brand new, because then I would have grasped maybe the city in their operations better.
I mean, that's what we do in concealed carry classes. We just pretend nobody can shoot. That way,
right?
Nobody gets shot.
Well, and it's easy. It's easier because it's a basic class,
right?
Yeah.
And it's just like anything else. A lot of people are you've been on the job for 15 years. Maybe you don't want to ask questions. Maybe you don't want to make yourself look a little silly. Not just you, but
I get that too. Definitely.
Like, we're hiring you because you have a lot of experience, and you're like, what's a fire truck? Yeah.
Well, we've had people come in that worked some years in some busy departments, and some people come in with the attitude of like, what could you possibly teach me?
Yeah.
And they don't say that, but you kind of get that feeling. But
you gotta be a good student too.
There are other people that have the same experience. One of them is a mutual friend that we have. I won't say his name, but he came in and was just like, I don't know anything. Teach me what you know. I don't know anything. And
it's the way
I know damn well that he knows a lot. So it's just, what kind of person are you going to be?
Do you guys have any metrics that you use to decide whether somebody is a good leader or not?
Well, I think anytime somebody promotes to or assumes a leadership role, I think was talked about earlier, but everybody watches. Everybody that, especially those under them, but those above them too. Everybody watches. And I think for me, the thing that you look at, or things I looked at, is how does this person deal with people? Because that's what it's all about. I mean, if they deal with people well, they're probably going to get better results. But, as far as having a metric to go by specifically, I don't know. But it's a lot of observation.
You don't have a checklist in your back pocket?
I don't. Surprisingly enough, I'm really a spreadsheet guy, but I never made one for that. But
yeah.
You still like spreadsheets?
I love spreadsheets.
I think it's hard to quantify. And I think that's one reason why it's hard to be a good leader. And some people, on paper check all the boxes and they just never live up to it. And there's
seen a lot of box checkers.
Well, but then there's a lot of people who don't really look good on paper, but in the role they do well. So I think that's one of the things that it's just hard to measure, right? And with a lot of jobs, like how do they promote?
I think that's why it gets talked about so much, because you can't be like, well, he's a NASCAR driver,
right?
Like it's not the same. He's a leader. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Right. That's why it's so interesting to get into the, what to look for,
right?
And it's all opinion based, I guess.
I think maybe you measure it by, in part, and maybe in large part, the results that leader gets from their people.
Mm.
Okay. On a day-to-day basis, on big issues, big incidents, but I think you measure it by the results that leader helps create, because they don't create them. Their people create them.
Right.
But the leader's got to get them there.
Mm-hmm.
Was that like looking at somebody's kids to see if they're a decent parent? Now that's not for every
case, but
every case, but you can get a good idea.
Yeah. Maybe so.
My kids are crazy.
Yeah. Well,
so are yours.
Yeah.
I think the best way to quantify it is with yearly reviews where everybody gets a perfect score.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody likes to give somebody a bad evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And that just
doesn't help that person grow.
Does not help that person, does not help the process.
Right.
It's difficult to do that, but you're not helping that person 1 ounce.
Right.
If you just, you're doing a great job. And then the next day, man, they're terrible. They're terrible at this.
Right.
Well, that kind of thing's not getting any better with retention rates the way they are.
Sure.
And a lot of people aren't going to be like, you kind of suck, but
I've seen a lot of,
we need you.
Not bad. I've seen a lot
of with your chest.
I've seen a lot of people make probation because their superiors didn't write it down and give them honest reviews, not even bad reviews, but honest reviews, and not to say that they should or shouldn't have made probation, but you didn't do anything to fix the problem. Oh yeah, you're great. And then like you said, the next day, God, they can't do this. They're terrible at that.
Yeah. And that's what probation's for.
That's right.
You got to be honest with people so they can fix themselves too.
Well,
I think.
What do you
mediate that? Yeah.
What do you do as a chief when somebody comes to you and says, this guy's a problem? His probation's up in a month. We got to do something about it. And you go, I don't have anything on him. What do you want me to do about it?
That's about it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Granted, in most, if not all cases, of probationary employees can be let go with or without reason. Now, that's been the way it's always been. I don't know in today's society if that even holds water anymore, because everybody's litigious and
right,
could probably get past that. But yeah, somebody comes in and says, "Hey, person X is just not cutting it," and you pull their file and look at their quarterly or semi-annual review during their probation, and everybody that's evaluated them is giving them, "Oh, they're doing great." They're,
right.
Everybody's afraid to say that, and something's not right or take the time to fix it. You're about hamstrung,
right?
I'm not in any way saying the answer is to do paperwork on everything, but
no.
I think it's a stigma of, if you don't get a perfect review, that reflects negatively on you, and that shouldn't be the case. Now, I've had this two ways. I've had evaluations where I got, perfect scores on everything. And then you could tell they marked me a 3 on one thing because they didn't want to give me a perfect eval. And I'm like, the one thing that you took points off is the thing that I think I'm the best at. Right.
So it wasn't honest at all.
Classic case of pencil whipping.
But I've also had leaders say, hey, nobody gets perfect reviews. I don't remember how all review systems are different. I think it's like you get like a 1 to 5 usually, and 3 is satisfactory. It's like 3 is good. Like, you're not going to get all 5s. If you're getting all 3s, that means that you're meeting the standard, right? Some people view it as like, well, if you don't get all 5s, if you get a 4, it's like, oh, you're only exceeding our expectations. So you need to be doing better than that.
Part of the problem with that, and specifically in the fire service, is so many times departments will go with some generic employee evaluation form that's not tailored to the job. And, you're trying to grade somebody based on.
Yeah, you can't 1 through 5 if they show up to work on time.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're grading them on flipping burgers when they're,
Right. I've definitely seen that, the generic.
It's an easy out instead of developing your own form. But if it doesn't apply, then how do you expect the results?
I still look at forms at work that have your name on it, so I know you can make a form. I made the hell out of a form.
I made a couple of forms, all based on spreadsheets.
The other problem with that approach too is if you have 3 shifts, are all shifts evaluating the same way? Because if you're being honest and you're giving somebody 3s and 4s, maybe a 5, maybe a 2, and the other shifts are going 5s across the board. Everybody, our shift is the best, right? Because that happens too.
Oh yeah.
And then it comes time to promote and they go, Mr. Box Checker over here has 5s across the board and you got a couple of 3s, you got a 4. We're going to go with this guy, the 5s across the board. And it's like, but it's just it
just perpetuates the cycle.
Yeah, right.
So the guys are like, next time everybody's going to get a 5 and I'll just tell them what they're doing wrong.
And actually, I know.
Or not tell them.
I joke about the whole Jocko thing, but that was kind of, for me, that was my first exposure to any kind of like leadership material. But he did an episode. I don't remember which one it was. It might have actually been multiple, but he goes through the Marine Corps' review process and it spells out every single thing that you're evaluated on. It spells it out in detail. And it also in detail spells out what, if it's 1 through 5, say, what's a 1, what's a 2, what's a 3. And you can ask somebody, you say, this says, if you're a 5, you met or you exceeded expectations, went above and beyond what's expected of you, so on and so forth. So you could say like, somebody goes, well, I think I should have got a 5. And then you read it and you go, does that describe you? And most people have enough, self-awareness to say, okay, maybe I don't deserve a 5.
I like that.
Maybe they ought to change the categories instead of numbers. Let's go from dipshit to saint.
Right. I mean, like you said,
to score somebody as a saint.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, you're doing them a disservice because anything that I know now was because I screwed it up before or I looked stupid. But if you don't know you're looking stupid, then you just always got to be stupid.
Exactly.
That's my primary motivator is like,
not to look stupid.
Don't look stupid.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't want to.
It'll carry you far. When I'm supposed to know where something's at, somebody goes, it's not in there. Then you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that again. I don't want to look. And I say this all the time. Do people not have that anymore? Because people just shrug it off. So if somebody gets a talking to about them not knowing where something's at or doing something wrong, or they don't know where they're going, the thing that you should do when you get back is go figure it out or ask. I don't see that. I don't see that very often,
Failure's a great teacher.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess I always took it for granted.
If you act on it.
Yeah, I took it for granted that people didn't want to seem like a fool, but.
Well, I think there's something called pro-social shame. And I think that's what you're talking about, which is like, you don't want to have to deal with the embarrassment of not knowing or doing something and looking stupid and having to be a little bit ashamed. So it sometimes keeps you in check, right?
Yeah, it's like anything else. You remember mainly how you felt at any given moment.
Sure.
Not, and the shame is a big motivator.
You see that a lot in training situations where you're doing a group training and maybe it's a certain task and you have people that jump right in, and then you have people, and sometimes they're senior people that hold back, just kind of refreshing their memory before they jump in, because I don't want to look like I'm not quite sure. Maybe I'm going to miss a step, but I don't want to jump right in there. I'll watch a couple and refresh my memory. You see that a lot.
Yeah, they don't want to go back and shave their mustache off in shame.
Right. Horrible.
Looking at you, Tim.
What? I messed it up last year. Trimmed it a little too hard.
Are you allowed to have the goatee part?
I'll go back to work sometime this week. Take it off.
Are you guys allowed to have the goatee part?
I don't know. Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. What do they call that? The ball buffer? We need a cricket and a t-shirt press. I could make so many cool shirts.
Just keep writing down the cool things.
Check the box.
The ball and the bandsaw thing.
Balls, bandsaws, checking the boxes, ball buffers.
Absolutely.
Man, I would love to add a failed t-shirt business to my list of failed business ventures.
You want to get in on this one or what?
Let's do it.
Oh, I had a question for you. The last episode we did with Matt, he's been doing jiu-jitsu for a few years, and he asked us, why are people in jiu-jitsu disproportionately public servants? And since you is one,
oh yeah,
you're like jiu-jitsu.
Well, first, I'm a skeptic by nature. I don't know if that's necessarily true.
He did say in his gym, he wasn't really saying everywhere, but
sure.
In his gym, it just so happens that.
One reason is because there's a big push in law enforcement for people to train jiu-jitsu. And it's kind of more of I don't think it's being pushed by departments. It's kind of a
culture thing. A
culture thing. Yeah. So that's one reason. Another reason is a lot of these places that's their target demographic, right? So I would venture to guess that it's probably more police heavy, but also, I don't know, maybe I don't know what it is. I guess it's maybe a personality thing. Maybe the types of people that get into this profession are more likely to try.
The gym owners can spot like a crew cut and a mustache from a mile away.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of first responders that train, but I don't know that it's just so disproportionate. Now, another thing too is depending on what school you're at, some academies or gyms, whatever you want to call them, they have special programs for law enforcement where they can get like discounted or free. It's not free, it's paid for, but not by them. Memberships for a period of time. It's not forever, but so if you're at a school that participates in that, I think it's called, what's it called? Adopt a Cop is the one that I'm familiar with. If your school participates in Adopt a Cop, you're probably going to have a lot more cops there because, yeah.
Interesting.
Hella marketing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Chris.
Uh-oh.
So if you could offer somebody that's coming up, wants to be a leader, could you offer them a path or a piece of advice to, how do they become a leader?
Well, obviously, I guess wanting to become a leader, I think the first thing you need to do is take a good self-inventory. Am I ready for this position? Am I ready to move up? Do I have the skill sets? Am I someone that others will follow, because if I don't care what your situation is, if as a leader, if nobody will follow you, guess what? You're not a leader. So the first thing is look at yourself first. How am I doing things? What's my skill set? What's my experience level? And then even before a promotion or something like that to a position, take some initiative. Start doing those leadership things. Take the lead in certain things. Again, a lot of the best leadership is by example. Think about, as a person, what example have I set? What examples am I setting? Can I set a better example? And start doing it.
Okay.
That's the beginning, and then there's obviously, and there's scads and scads of training out there that you can go get that helps refine.
Come see you.
Wait, come see me. Yeah, yeah, sure. We'll take you at BG for sure.
It's a good time if anybody's looking. Good class. Good series of classes.
Yeah, it's a series. It's not just one.
What do you think, John?
I can tell you what I think because I guess I have been in some leadership roles, but I've mostly just been kind of a worker bee. But that being said, I really like what Chris said about self-inventory. I think that's important. But if we're talking about a role, ask yourself, what would the best person for this role look like? And then ask yourself, do I fit that? Right? If not, figure it out. But a lot of it could just be these are the qualities of the person who would be best for this role. I'm going to do my best to emulate that. Another thing, and I think Chris touched on this too, I'm not saying take charge in every situation, but identify the opportunities where somebody maybe should be in charge and nobody is, and just take the lead. And it can be the littlest things, but just don't be afraid to make mistakes. I know we touched on that earlier, but
it's huge.
The example that I used, and I know I've told you this story before, but I'm going to tell old war stories. When I was deployed to Afghanistan, I was an E3, which is very much like it starts at E1. So I got 2 promotions that I didn't have to do anything for except for show up to work. When I'm deployed
and not get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, even then you get in trouble. It just sets you back 6 months. You'll still get it.
Yeah.
And at this point I'm in the Army less than 2 years. I'm deployed to Afghanistan and I don't remember the situation. I think it was like my section leader had a beef or was quarreling with my team leader. So a team leader is going to be in charge of like 5 to 6 guys. Section leader is going to have about 12 guys. And he just goes, hey, Repp, you're the new team leader for Alpha Team. And I'm like, okay. And that's an E5 position. That's an NCO, like a sergeant's position.
Yeah.
And this sergeant, who was previously the team leader, is in my team. So I'm the team leader. The fired team leader is in my team. And I was actually fortunate that
awkward.
I was pretty fortunate though, because he was like all about helping me. He wasn't just like, go ahead and figure it out.
Which would be easy to do. Like, screw you.
Well, it's probably a little bit harder when it is kind of a life or death situation.
That's true.
But it's like the next thing I know, I'm in charge of a fire team and I'm walking point. And it's like, nobody prepared me for that. I just had to do it. And then, I was shitting my Huggies the first couple of times we rolled out. And it's like, because, being the point guy is stressful enough. And I was on, my section was always like the forward element. So like that's stressful enough. And then you throw in all the kind of little, management type stuff too. But I just kept,
you don't realize how much you watch somebody till you absolutely have to emulate.
well, yeah. And it's like, it's like all that stuff. And then it's like, now, instead of going to the gym to work out after dinner, I'm going to mission plannings and I'm sitting in meetings and I'm doing, pre-patrol checks and inspections and stuff like that. Stuff that I had participated in before. But again, like I'm kind of like the guy and I'm not used to being the guy. My point there is it was really hard at first and I was just constantly feeling like I didn't belong there. And after just doing it a handful of times, you kind of get used to it and you see like, okay, like you get a little bit of confidence. You don't want to be too confident, but you go, okay, I can do this. And it's just showing up. Right.
Yeah. And it goes back to, that made me think of, well, for those who don't know, me and Repp were in basic together almost how long ago? 12 years. 12 years ago.
Damn.
Drill Sergeant Martin always said
13.
Oh, 13.
Yeah.
What did he always say? You might not, you can do it better.
Oh
you know
my
the quote
God.
better.
I remember because I got
for fire.
I got a story about this one.
Yeah.
We're doing call for fire training, which is like calling for artillery or mortars. I think everybody does that training in basic training. Like, I don't think it was scout specific.
Really? I thought it was an OSIT.
Okay. Well, maybe it was, but
Either way.
regardless, it's a basic training is like bare minimum. Like they're just giving you a quick overview. We're doing this call for fire training. And he just goes, are you as a private ever going to call for fire? Probably not. He said, it's usually going to be your sergeant or your staff sergeant, but you might. So fast forward.
And then you do.
Yeah. So fast forward about, I don't know, what was it? Probably a year. And I'm on a hilltop in Afghanistan and some shit's going down. And I'm like, those words were ringing in my head because we didn't actually have to call for fire, but I had to call the mortar pit and have them lay guns on an area. And I was like, no shit.
Yeah. So when they say know the job above you and below you,
Right.
it's extremely important.
And I think we were talking too about, to get back on track of like qualities of a leader, knowing your job is huge, and I understand that other jobs are different, maybe in the corporate world or what have you, but
It is quite the concept. Know your job.
yeah. But so I think that's one of the first steps of leadership is like, you want to be the guy or the person that when people have questions about something, they come to you, right? That's a good start. That doesn't mean that when you become a leader, you micromanage everybody.
And it's usually that senior man that doesn't want promoted, that everybody wants promoted because they don't actually,
Yes.
they just know their job well and will offer information to you whenever you ask.
Yeah. And you need them too.
Mhm.
You absolutely need those people who have no desire to be promoted, but know the job well. And that they're a huge benefit, right? You got to put people in places where they're going to succeed. And some people that's just where they want to be.
Yep.
I'm sure. Oh, sorry to cut you off.
It's okay.
A lot of people can relate to somebody having a problem and they're usually going to go to the senior guy and not the officer.
Just the way God intended.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, you're talking about senior people that know the job well. Leaders need those senior people that they can 100% count on, because not everybody's can count on them 100% level. You have to try to get them there, but without those experienced senior people in any application, it's probably more prevalent in public safety or military, but you have to have those people that those leaders can count on, because it takes a little weight off the leader.
Yeah.
Especially when it gets tougher, gets real.
Absolutely.
Those are the people you're like,
Yep.
they're going to get it done.
Yeah. You can't manufacture experience.
I like that.
Yeah.
Write that down.
T-shirt.
Man, we got so many t-shirts coming out.
Maybe just one big T-shirt with everything on
With
it.
everything on it.
It'll be like when you wore your class shirt on the last day of school and people signed it.
Right?
Just put a bunch of random quotes on it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about leadership. Another thing that I want to talk to Chris about is your beer.
We want to talk about beer?
Yeah. I mean, just a little bit. I mean, I've tasted your beer.
Did you bring any?
I didn't. I wasn't told to bring any.
Man, it's going to be a part 2, but I've tasted it. It's amazing.
Thank you.
I don't know whether you're an artist or a mad scientist because you talk about different water and all this other crazy stuff. Just, I mean, brush on it a little bit. You know, how'd you get started?
Oh, geez. Okay. So, yeah. So, back in the day, I drank all of the generic mass-produced beers that everybody drinks. Miller Lite and the one that won't be named. But at one point, I was probably 2010, and had the opportunity to go to Europe for a couple of weeks. And great, I'm going to try all these great beers. Anyway, I found out that there were absolutely none that I didn't like. And I came back to the States, and the old standbys just didn't cut it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, I'll try an import here or there. And then discovered craft beer as it started to get bigger and bigger. I'm like, this is way better than anything else. And always wanted to dabble in trying to brew beer because I knew a lot of people home brewed.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife decided she was going to get me started. So
it is her fault.
it is her fault.
Okay.
So she got my startup set. She talked to Duncan at the Phoenix and what do I get him? How do I get him started? And surprised me with this starter kit for making beer. And she calls it Helga. So she bought me my mistress because I'm out in the garage playing with my stuff.
Me
Which
too.
allows her to go in and watch Hallmark, which is her thing. But so that began my journey in actually homebrewing myself. I just kind of went crazy with it. So now I've got tons of equipment, and everybody starts out. Most everybody starts out homebrew. They use these extract kits, so you're not having to mill your own grain. And so I did some of those, and I thought, I want to kick it up a notch again. So went to all grain. And the whole thing with brewing beer is you just have to learn the process. As soon as you're comfortable with the process, and part of the process is a lot of cleaning and sanitizing your equipment. Not that equipment, but your beer equipment. And but then once you're going full bore and have a good grasp of how the process works, it's pretty much limited by your imagination and science. But yeah, you talked about, water is a huge part. I mean, 80 to 90% of beer is water. So the water profile's got to be right for the style. And it's really been a great hobby. And I've been pretty lucky because usually people don't have to spit my beer out. So
I never have. And the crazy thing to me is like the other day I sampled, I don't remember how many you had, like 5 or 6 different ones.
mm-hmm.
They were all good. And they were all different
styles. Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, I think there's, beyond experimentals, I think there's actually 37 recognized beer styles.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
That's
it's
a lot of beer styles.
It was absolutely crazy. And they tasted so good.
well, we'll have to take this on the road for a brew day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Brew Day podcast.
I know we talked about that before, but yeah, if we can figure it out, and I think that would be very interesting.
That way you guys can play.
Yeah, definitely. What, how long does it take from like, hey, I'm going to start brewing today or start the process today, like how long is the process till I'm drinking it out of a bottle?
So typically, your brew day is about for one batch of beer, and I do 5-gallon batches. So, but your typical brew day is maybe 4.5, 5 hours, start to finish. Once it's in the fermenter, rule of thumb is 4 weeks of fermentation. Now that can be shortened depending on what yeast strains you're using and temperature and all that stuff, but style of beer. But typically plan on 4 weeks. And then at that point, you either keg or bottle your beer. If you keg it, you're going to carbonate it in a keg. That's faster.
Mm-hmm.
If you bottle, then you got all the bottles to clean and sanitize, which is what I started with. I've been kegging for a while now, and I've got a counter pressure tap filler, so I can bottle right off the taps now. So
you didn't realize how expensive it was going to get, did you?
Actually, I say this all the time, but if I had all the money I spent on hunting all my life and put it into brewing beer, I'd have a lot more stuff.
You'd have a big brewery.
It's I don't know about that, but it's.
I would have a lot more hunting equipment if all the money I spent on beer.
Well, yeah, there's that too. But
Definitely.
Brewing and hunting are kind of the same. You still drink the beer. Right. But no, it's really, to get it on a beginning level, you can do it and make really good beer, and it's not that expensive to start.
I'm kind of intrigued.
He'll be doing it by next week.
I had a friend of mine, I think he still home brews, but he started home brewing, I don't know, probably 15 years ago. And it was not, now it's a lot more common, but when he first told me he was brewing his own beer, like I thought he was whipping up Busch Lights in his basement. I'm like, man, times must be hard if he's trying to brew his own swill. But then I eventually realized that it was, it's more of it is a
artisan
craft. Yeah, it is a craft. Yeah, it's not like just trying to mass produce.
If things turn out right, it's partially art and partially mad scientist, I guess, but it's really a lot of fun.
Are you going to sell it? I won't tell the IRS.
No, see, that's the tricky part because you can really, in order to sell it, you've got to be licensed and you've got to have these permits and you've got
FDA and
there's a whole laundry list of everybody has their handouts to do that.
What if you do a raffle?
Yeah, I don't know. There's probably the powers that be probably would find something wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun just sharing with family and friends and
yeah.
Do you have any goals of ever being a brewmaster? Not saying that you're not, but like to have a brewery?
I'd love to. However, we already confirmed that I'm old. So it's that and financially, that's a huge step.
Yeah, definitely.
The cool thing about the professional craft breweries is they really don't compete. It's one business I can think of that they really don't compete because the more good breweries you have in an area, the bigger draw that is. So it becomes a destination, and because there are tons of people, myself included, that, we like to go out and try different places.
Try them all.
If you go to a place, an area where there's half a dozen or better, that's your day.
Yeah. You know what they say? Once you've been to one brewery, you want to go to all the breweries.
You do. Absolutely. Because they're all different. And they all have different aesthetics and it's really kind of neat. So if you haven't done that.
I haven't been to all of them. I'm going to try.
I've been mentoring Timmy and
man, I'm on the path.
It's really easy to get somebody into the conversation. Like, do you like beer? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do.
Do you want to make some? Mm-hmm.
It's kind of its own thing though. It's like, it is like a bar, but it's not. Doing breweries is not the same as like going to bars.
No.
And I think it's kind of maybe coming full circle because early on it was because like I live closer to Cleveland and Great Lakes is in Cleveland. It's been there for a while, as long as I can remember.
Do you live in Cleveland?
No, I'm closer to Cleveland than
might as well be.
for those of you who don't know, Tim thinks everything north of Route 18 is Cleveland.
Just north of Ashland.
North of Ashland.
North of Ashland.
Yeah.
You live north of Ashland, you're in Cleveland.
Yeah. But it got really popular. And then all these places are doing really well, started getting bought out by bigger operations. But also now you're starting to see, because breweries are a dime a dozen, some of them are closing their doors. So it's going to be the ones that have backing of the big corporations and the ones that are just really good that people like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's possible. I mean, that's there's some of that going on. But the true mom and pop, really good ones, I think I don't want to say they're bulletproof, but they're in pretty good shape, I think.
Yeah, they're here to stay.
Yep.
They're getting a lot more support lately. Tell you that.
I do.
Well, and you talked about like even the home brewers. There's a whole network of you guys that get together and share. I don't know what it is you share because I'm not part of the network, but I'm sure it's all good stuff.
Have you entered in contests and stuff?
I entered one.
Did it go good?
I entered one in Cleveland, and it was actually at Fatheads.
Also not in Ashland.
That was no, it was far north of Ashland, but
Freaking Cleveland.
And I'd only been at it for, I was only at it about a year and a half. And these competitions they have judges for all the different styles, and there's hundreds of beers entered, and score wise, I did really well. It's just the style categories that I entered were like, I should have picked some with less.
Yeah, they were massive.
And so I scored really well and got a lot of good feedback, which is why I did it, because the judges will write feedback. And so I wasn't disappointed that I didn't medal, but I learned a lot, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, as far as networks, we were in the Society of Northeast Ohio Brewers when we lived up north. That's Snobs.
The Snobs, the beer snobs.
Which is a really big homebrew club. Excellent people in it. A lot of people from that have thus moved on and gone pro. That some of them are good friends. But our local homebrew club in Mansfield, it's obviously smaller, but I think everybody in it makes great beer. And so we meet like the last Monday of every month. We meet at the Phoenix. Everybody that brews in the club brings samples. And so we'll have our meeting and food and all that. And then the rest of the meeting is sampling what everybody brought. So it's a good way to exchange information. If you're in brewing or thinking about getting into brewing, come to a meeting.
Nice.
I mean, there's meetings that go the other way for this, but we have our own meetings that cause the other meetings. But,
well, there's the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after.
Sure. Yeah, right.
I was actually really intrigued about brewing beer 5 minutes ago, but then when he talked about the competitions and the judging, I do think I just want to be a judge.
Yeah, you have to work your way up to judge. You got to get some.
It's actually a pretty tough certification process. I looked into it a little bit. You have to have the time because you have to take classes, and you have to understand. You have to understand the process. You have to understand the styles. You have to understand aromas and tastes and all flavors and all that business. Oh yeah. So it's a pretty stringent test to get up through the process to actually be a certified judge.
I think I'm back to being a brewer now.
Do you get paid? Do you get any? Do you get paid in beer? I'm assuming.
Pretty much. Yeah. I don't know that judges get paid. I don't know. I've never asked, but
I don't know. When I thought about what I was going to be when I grew up, I didn't even think about being a beer judge.
A beer judge, and have him on the show.
A beer judge?
That's easy. I can do that for you.
You know some?
I'll find you somebody. I know some judges.
We'll get a beer judge panel.
Yeah. I know some local judges that would be happy to be on your show.
Yeah, we'll have them on here.
I'd love to.
Ask them about their palate and stuff.
What's up with your palate?
Yeah.
They'll tell you about it.
There's probably
and we could have them do the blind taste test thing, with all the straws. What's that?
Is this Pepsi?
I knew you were going to say that for some reason.
You get somebody's dip spit.
That'd be
Oh, sorry, that's the wrong cup. I knew I should have used a different one.
I'm going to wrap this up before we completely derail into a wall.
We're not even drinking.
I think it's just getting started. Everybody listening's like, homebrew club. They meet at the bars. This will pass for
Honey,
yeah.
hear me out.
Yeah, honey, I'm joining a club. I got a club meeting.
Is there a link we can put below for people that are interested?
Yes, I'll get you one.
Okay, I'll put it in the show notes so people can check
one.
that out.
Perfect.
Yep. Anything you want to close with, John?
I don't think so.
I'll just throw reputable property services in there too, just to
RPS.
Or don't. I don't know if I want to be directly associated with.
Fair enough.
No, you can if you want.
Yeah. Nobody's gonna when you pull up in that blue truck with that mullet, people are gonna know.
Yeah. I'm doing Christmas lights now, so call me.
Timmy, you got anything?
No, I don't.
Right on. Well, thank you guys for coming and chatting with us.
Thank
Didn't ask
you.
Chris
Good
if
time.
he had anything to add. Anything you want to say?
I didn't?
No, you didn't.
Sorry.
No, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I realize now I shouldn't have lost a lot of sleep over it last night, worried about looking dumb.
No, it's all good.
It is what it is. I've looked dumb before.
Just four guys talking.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
It's like being a fire
Yeah.
chief. If you screw it up, you just do it better next time.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to have you on again whenever you want. So
We're going to be brewing beer next time.
yeah, I'm cool with
That
that.
would be a fun one.
I'll get a camera guy.
That would be a fun one.
I'll be the camera guy.
You be the camera
There
guy.
we go. Man, we're good.
All right, guys.
I don't know the first thing about being a camera guy, but I'll do it.
All right. Later, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.